Okay, so before we start, I just want to give a heads up that I have kind of changed my overall strategy because of the evaluation review. So there will be a different set of slides and a different structure. So yeah, hopefully, and I probably would love to know the feedback from everyone as to how the flow is and if the change in the strategy is kind of dropping key information that's really relevant and now missing, which will make the solution complete.
All right.
Cool. So I will be ready when you guys are.
I am ready.
Okay, so 30 minutes, here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining a presentation on transformation for Santa Corp. Basically, all of you would be aware of Santa Claus, but the idea is we're now making things real here. Santa Corp is on a mission to make to create a really amazing child-centric operation. And the goal is to actually automate from the wishing to delivery of the gifts to each children during Christmas. And they want to do it using drones, and they want to make a digital transformation to make sure kids are able to access and make a wish through mobile application. They're able to raise a support request and be able to get to understand how they're performing over the course of the year. So that's basically the goal of Santa Corp, and the goal and the program is named as Robo Santa. So it's really amazing. I'm sure kids will enjoy it and would be really keen to get on board of this program. So there are key elements that we really need to make sure we get out of the window before we start before we get into the weeds of the program and the details. So I would like to get your attention onto the solution overview and some of the assumptions that I have made. There are two areas of the solution. One is for the pilot, and our solution that I'm going to be focusing on today is only going to be on the pilot aspect of the requirement from RoboSanta. But there is an eventual recommendation as well. The eventual recommendation would be a multi-org strategy, which will be a replication. The reason it will be a multi-org strategy eventually for the larger, wider go live, that's because there are different regions. Each region will have, at this point in time, the scale of the district is 2 million children within a district. So eventually, if it's a global rollout, the data volumes on customers, as well as the data that would be needed to access the system, will not suffice on one single org. And the second would be the ability to report and get stored data within a single org as well, will not suffice in a single org. But for the purposes of the pilot, the org strategy remains as a single org strategy, which will be by the virtue of unification, because each users, the different roles and users, going to be using the same system. They want to be able to get a full view of the children. They want to be able to track their wishes, be able to support them from wish to fulfillment. That's what we're going to call that process. At this point in time, multi-language will be needed. Because there could be different types of users or children. Again, there's no explicit statement within this scenario, but I've just made that assumption to make the application more user-friendly, because user and customer centricity is the goal of the program. No multi-currency, because it's gifts. Customers and children don't have to pay for any of it, and Santa Corp is not keen to track their finances because it's magically available to them. There are a couple of assumptions that I have made. As I called out earlier, the solution walkthrough is from a perspective of a single org, which is the case of the pilot requirement. We will have to make some assumptions on data migration from the deed tracker system, given that they have a very custom API called the Neuro API available to move data around. So we're going to work with the Santa Corp team to migrate certain data from the deed tracker system. The data model is built using the principle of least privilege. Where applicable, we will open the access control for appropriate users. There will be a few more assumptions that we will come across, and I will state them as we go through the scenarios. Moving on, there are certain risks that I really want to make sure I call it out, and appropriate mitigation strategies that we will be taking to mitigate those risks. Neuro API, it's a really custom proprietary API, so we will need help from Santa Corp to help move data from the deeds management system. There's at this point in time 2 elements to move data, one from the deeds management system to Salesforce for the 2 million customers that children that we will identify for that appropriate district. and then also write data back into the deeds management system to using the Salesforce record ID, which will be the customer master going forward, or children master going forward. Large data volumes. There are a ton of objects here that are going beyond 12 million record storage. We will call them out, and the ideal mitigation strategy would be to use skinny tables, custom indexes, and we'll also make sure we'll add governances in place to make sure the list views are selective, the SQL queries that we write are selective, and we try and prevent as much generic queries either using programmatic or standard Salesforce platform scale. There is a limitation of customer community license that can have only 10 million customers or 10 million users, but we can mitigate that to a certain extent by using login based. But eventually, when the system rolls out to global children and users, we will not be able to cater to that volumes. But at this time, for the purposes of pilot, this scale only applies on the data volume side rather than user license side. I want to quickly also walk you through the key actors and the appropriate licenses we're going to be giving to these users. At this point in time, this is a predominantly service use case where SantaCorp is really interested in providing the gifts that's fulfilling the gifts that they have identified to the appropriate children, and also making sure they support in the eventual successful delivery of the gifts, and on receipt, children can actually raise requests to get support in that as well. Hence, the DOE, FEs, and DRE are Service Cloud users. There are a couple of additional considerations that we have that I would like to call out as well. There are requirements around using WhatsApp to send notifications and chatbots as well. So we're going to be using digital engagements licenses for that. There are a couple of requirements around handwriting recognition. We're going to be using Einstein Discovery, OCR capability for that. And we also have a requirement for doc generation. And I'm proposing that we use Conga Composer for that. At this point in time, those are documented in system landscape, and hence I'm calling it out here. It's also and for customers as well, eventually, the kids who are going to be logging into the system at this point in time, the communicated volume is 2 million per district. And hence, we are going to be giving them customer community licenses. That is because we don't need all reporting and dashboarding requirements that are provided within the scenario. I'm going to walk you through how we're solving without standard Salesforce reporting. We don't need advanced sharing for these kids as well. So all sharing requirements are also going to be fulfilled. We do not, and as I go through the data model, you'll also come to realize that the customer community license will suffice, as well as Service Cloud for these users. And the key consideration behind Service Cloud is because we will need cases, we'll need assets, we'll be needing certain out-of-the-box capabilities for Einstein chatbots, and then we'll be topping that up using digital engagements to suffice our additional requirements. Moving on, role hierarchy, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We have our amazing Santa at the top, and it's a pretty flat hierarchy. We have row outcome optimization elves. They are, just a heads up, they are called as DOE/DEO interchangeably within the scenario. So we will keep a mind on that one. Fulfillment elves as well just sit directly in Santa. Drone repair elves sit directly under Santa as well. And we have customers. Again, customers don't have a role because we're not using any role-based licenses, but I've just marked them within the role hierarchy just for completeness and correctness of the role indication for better visualization. One consideration that I wanted to call out is that I was thinking of breaking down drone repair elves into a separate service channel. But at this point in time, I believe experience is the key element, and there aren't a lot of sharing requirements that would foresee or that would force me to make that choice. Hence the hierarchy is kept pretty flat here. As we go to the next slide, I want to also give you a quick overview of our system landscape. So the key components that exist and how we're going to be tying all of these things together. I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit just to give a more clear view. Okay. Yeah, so at this point in time, what we have, there are a couple of recommendations that I am making, and we'll also walk through during in our system landscape. So on the left-hand side, we have the channels. We then have a salesforce org. We have our layer for ESB and ETL, which is protected by DMZ, and then we have external systems. Now, the entry points for Salesforce are a few. So we have mobile publisher. That is what I will be recommending for kids to use that application. Couple of reasons for that recommendation. It supports highly customizable branding. It works really well with out-of-the-box experience cloud communities, as well as it works really well with LWC customizations that we'll be proposing and I'll be walking you guys through you all through later in the scenario as well. There are a couple of other entry points as well. Kids are able to trigger on chat with the appropriate service representatives to help them understand how they can improve their lead score. So we have chat capabilities, entry points, HTTPS via web. Kids should need to be receiving WhatsApp notification. The arrow should be pointing the other way. And we're going to be using Salesforce digital engagement to trigger off that notification. A message to the customers. They'll be signing up. Another important key to understand is that they're going to be signing up using their email address and phone number. So any children who signed up using their phone number will be able to get WhatsApp notifications. And plus web. Web is basically children or kids who are going to be using their laptops or personal computer devices to sign into the customer community. So Service Cloud is the key element from the Salesforce platform as well as customer community. We have a bunch of connected apps. We will, again, I've just added one boxes for the sake of brevity, but based on the connections coming in, so ESB will get its own connected app. We will have ETL system getting its own connected app. Publisher for Android and iOS will automatically on installation will create its own connected app as well. So we will have at least a minimum of 4 connected apps in the eventual state. Now, there are a couple of items that I wanted to highlight. So the drone tracking application at this point in time, SantaCorp is requesting for recommendations on how they can make that application scale better. My recommendation is to actually take that application off and host it on Heroku. It's a Python-based app. Heroku has out-of-the-box native support for Python applications, and it can very seamlessly talk to Postgres database. And that's an assumption that I'm making, that behind the scenes, behind the Python application layer, the database layer is compatible to the ones that are provided by Heroku, which is Postgres in our instance. MuleSoft will be our ESB, ETL will be Informatica. And this is where we will have to work with SantaCorp to move the 2 million customers that are accessible via a Neuro API. So either we will have an export of that information, and we will use Informatica to move that information. The ideal, again, the other thing that we need to make or keep into consideration that the data is available in a deduplicated fashion because Santa is a magical being and has all this information available to her in a deduplicated clean format. So ideally using Neuro API, we will work with SantaCorp to export that information and use the ETL tool to move it. Again, I was thinking of using data loader as well here, but I eventually recommended, my recommendation based on the volume was to use a out-of-the-box, off-the-shelf ETL tool, which is Informatica in this case. There are a couple of applications that I am indicating as well in the landscape, which is CDT, child deed tracker, there is wish management engine, and then a data warehouse to eventually move data off of platform because of the volume considerations. Ideally, we will have an operational data for 1 year because that's when a wish is valid up to children will make a wish, on the day or a couple of days after Christmas. They will receive their orders, assets, which is, so we have gifts that will be modeled in assets. We'll come to it as we walk through data model, and they will be stored in the system for a year. I'm also recommending a couple of connections with external systems. So child deed tracker, we will need to work with SantaCorp to create an OData layer enablement. At this point in time, the API is proprietary and it will not play well with any of the tools available with Salesforce. So that's another work that we'll have to do with SantaCorp. And then Wish Management Engine already supports REST. So we're going to use MuleSoft to bring any information from Wish Management Engine via OData layer into Salesforce. Moving on from the system landscape, I want to walk you all through the data model recommendation. Again, it's fairly standard plus custom, but just a heads up, we have three colors going on here. One is a big object, which is boxed in blue, and then we have black boxes, which are standard objects, and then we have red boxes, which are custom / external. Any external objects is actually marked as __ X to indicate its appropriate representation. So deeds and drones are the two external objects, but we'll go through object by object. I'm recommending to use person account to model our children. That makes it easy for us to plug and play it with digital engagements. And then ideally, as well as to link it with assets, because my recommendation is to model GIFs using assets. I did consider using order in this case, to model order and then model assets under those orders. Ideally, I was on the fence on using orders, and eventually I did not feel any additional use case to model order, because there are three applications of the assets. So drones, orders when they get packaged, QR codes are generated to scan them, mark appropriate status for assets. When the assets or when the order is completed, it's supposed to have a status of drop from the drone itself. But all of this can be modeled on one single asset, because it's a one-to-one relationship with children, and hence I decided to not go ahead using orders in this case. But if I were to, I probably would. Yeah, that's the consideration behind it. Case object is necessary to model certain use cases. A couple of use cases essentially. Children can reach out to the ODEs for recommendation on how they can improve their deed score. They have two opportunities to reach out to the ODEs. One is via raising cases. The other is via chat. We'll come to that use case as we go through the requirements in detail. I'm modeling wish list on a custom object. The data volume here is 10 million because each children or child can have up to 5 wish lists. Items, and then wish list can then be assigned or linked to a specific product based on the probability of that wish to be gifted or granted to that child. I am also proposing that we have a custom object that gets that information and stores that probability in Salesforce. Again, a data volume consideration here is that we will have to use skinny table for both wish list and wish to gift object, as well as selective indexes for using indexes for standard and custom indexes. We have Conga Composer objects are also linked for document generation purposes. Assets are going to be linking actual gifts to kids or children, and also drones. Santa Corp has about 2,000 drones, if I'm not mistaken, across 25 delivery hubs, and we're modeling drones as well as assets. And then each drones will have diagnostics information, which will allow elves to be able to mitigate any issues or breakdown within these drones. These drone information is already available in Heroku, which is being replaced by the drone tracking app. We will bring that information using OData via external objects. I decided to go with virtualization given the volumes that can be generated for the drone diagnostics. We are using deeds. Deeds, again, the same consideration. We need to build this OData layer with the child deed tracking system to be able to bring deeds within Salesforce as external objects. That is all on the data model side of things. What I would now go through is the business requirements, and we'll try and tackle them one by one. Great. So there are a few things that I really wanted to highlight as well, based on the assumptions I've made. There are 75 drone repair elves, and there is 25 hubs, which correctly places at least a minimum of 3 DRE per hub. That's one consideration to keep in mind, just to call out at the start. Now, as I mentioned in my system landscape as well, that it is really important to bring the child deed tracker or connect the child deed tracker system with Salesforce. And given its capability to only link with via the Neuro API, we will need we'll need to work with Santa Corp to make it OData enabled to bring that information in Salesforce via the ESB tool. Ideally, the recommendation would be to have an OData layer built on top of the child lead tracker, which MuleSoft can very easily plug and play into, and Salesforce Connect will allow us to bring that information and model it within the customer that is account for us. And the other bit that I indicated as well at the start, that data migration will need to be required to write the unique child record from Salesforce into child lead tracker for us to be able to model that external relationship inside of Salesforce, because the key consideration is that there is no machine readable ID that Santa is aware of at this point in time. So my recommendation would be to use the Salesforce globally unique 18 character ID to use that customer unique identifier. As we go forward, we've already identified that Heroku will be used to replace the drone tracking system. We'll now walk through the enrollment and wish intake business process here. One of the key elements of business of Santa Corp's transformation is adoption, and to drive this adoption, Rudolph really wants to have each of these gifts accompanied with a customized letter for that child. And here is where I'm proposing Conga Composer to be used to generate the customized letter, which can be accompanied with that gift. Again, there is a consideration that we need to take into account here. Printing of this gift letters or notes will have to be managed via an external warehouse. And in this case, we can very easily use our ETL tool, hence Informatica, to actually take out the PDF files that Conga Composer will generate and share it with the print house. In this case, I have not gone ahead to the extent of showing the print house here, but I would like to call out that the reason of using Informatica is basically to enable file-based sharing with the print house, or also converting that information into an actual template, which the print house will already have, and then the print house can actually use that information to print on letterheads or templates that they have. So that's a consideration to keep in mind. Again, the data volumes is not significant enough, at least for the pilot. We have 2 million children for which the gift needs to be, the letter needs to be generated. So Salesforce batch operation can really easily handle this operation, and this needs to be done once a year. So that's all within the bounds of standard Salesforce capability. And again, as I called out earlier, that we do not have a machine-friendly or machine-readable unified ID to tie children across different systems. So we're going to be using the Salesforce 18-character record ID here. As we go through the wish intake requirement, there's one thing that is really made aware of, and that's what I'm trying to call out here as an integration requirement. Whenever a child is born, that information needs to be saved into Salesforce, and anytime any information about that child gets updated, needs to also be updated in Salesforce accordingly. Now, in this case, my assumption is that Santa will do the translation and call a MuleSoft endpoint that will be responsible for saving that information into Salesforce, as well as the pattern that we will be using to write back into Salesforce will be remote call in via the MuleSoft. JWT will be the form of authentication between ESB and Salesforce. And as I said, any changes that are happening is made available to Santa auto magically, and then that information, given the context and terminology of the scenario, it'll probably be transmogrified into a REST/SOAP capability that MuleSoft endpoint will accept. Moving on, children can also register using the website or mobile application without the need to be adding or using a password. In this case, Experience Cloud passwordless login really seamlessly plugs and plays in here. Out of the box capability supported by web as well as mobile publisher. We can also add additional fields if necessary by dropping those fields into onto the form. At this point in time, none of that is necessary. Out of the box passwordless login will allow users to sign in using email and mobile phone numbers, which will trigger a notification on mobile phone with an authorization code, as well as on the email address with a link that will allow them to log in, complete the sign up process as well as the login process in case of the first time sign up and the second time login. children will need to be able to visualize their deed score over the course of time. Now, what we're trying to do here is basically do a bit of optimization. So instead of storing each of these deed score value within a single record, we're going to have the deed score system give us that information. We will transform that information within our ETL, and we will put that onto our big object here, which actually connects our deed dashboard. This also allows us to use the external record ID of the customers or children to be able to map that. Now, in this case, we will have only 12 record per child stored, but will still take us to about the volume of 24 million records here. The scores will be flattened out on fields within the big object rather than in terms of record. So ETL's doing the heavy lifting. Deed tracking system is providing us the deed score, which is flattened and stored onto big objects in Salesforce. And we're going to be using Lightning Web Components using with async queries to show that information, model that information onto the mobile app, as well as the web interface for kids to be able to see them. As we also discussed, that kids are able to maintain their wish list. We're going to give them a custom object, but we're going to give them a really seamless Lightning Web Component interface to be able to seamlessly manage that information. And this is where a bit of OCR capability is required. Kids can write a wish and then upload it. And my recommendation is to use the Einstein OCR. So a bit on that, we will have to integrate that. So we'll have to build in a custom Lightning Web Component that will allow us to use Einstein OCR capabilities. So it'll give us or expose an endpoint to us. That endpoint will accept a blob. We will upload the blob of the image to Einstein OCR to text converter. It'll give us in response, it will give us the text. We will then parse it and save it on the wish record. So that's what this flow indicates. Ideally, I've abstracted that information a little bit. We will have to make sure we train appropriately in case of multi-language support. Out of the box, it supports English language only. As we go forward, we have a requirement where each gift based on the child's deed score will have a probability to map as to how that information or how based on that deed score, how that child can improve their deed score. So for example, if a child is not being very studying, for example, is not been studying very well over the course of the year, they can get customized, they can get standardized ways of how they can improve that. My recommendation is to actually just use standard out-of-the-box knowledge articles to be able to provide that information to kids. Honestly, I don't think there are different ways to get better at studying apart from studying. Hence, I'm proposing standardization. But again, this also supports personalization. We can create processes for specific to each children. But at this point in time, out of the purview of the requirement, hence we're not going to solve for that use case. There are other requirements where children should be able to reach out to SantaCop via ODE, which are the people who are helping kids better their deed score, and they want to be able to diffuse the situation in case the kid is really not happy with the score that they've received. So I'm proposing a couple of options. One, they can log cases using the publisher app that allows to diffuse the situation a little. And the second is Einstein chatbots. Einstein chatbots can make interaction fun and automated. That way we can diffuse the situation early on while it post even before it reaches an ODE for support. So that's going to solve that requirement for case management. Again, at this point in time, there's no requirement that insisted that I use omni-channel routing. But ideally, I foresee that as the rollout goes for different regions, we will like to use omni-channel routing based on language, district, and maybe other capabilities, but none that signified the use case at this point in time. As we move on to the wish fulfillment process, so the kids have made a wish, we now need to fulfill that wish so that they can really enjoy their gifts that they've been provided. In this case, I have identified that we're going to be using an external object to link that wish to gift. Sorry, just give me a second. In this case, my original intention was to actually use an external object for wish to gift, but I then changed that consideration because that information is not that of a volume. So the data volume is not that significant, and that's only relevant for 1 year. So ideally, we can have that information brought into Salesforce and the probability can be calculated using an Apex patch. But as we go forward, ideally we may come back to it when a global rollout happens to see if there needs to be any additional consideration that takes in place that may change that recommendation. So ideally, the data volume, the complexity of the recommendation to calculate the probability wasn't significant enough. Hence, I went against external objects and brought that information in Salesforce, calculated in Salesforce, and based on changes on deed score, when a better gift option is available, we'll be able to send outbound messages via digital engagements. Again, digital engagements bring a custom object for when you start using the digital engagement capability. It has a messaging object which we can create a record into. So based on the deed score, we will need to track if the deed score is changing. How are we going to track that? Because it's an external object, the data is not available in Salesforce. Hence, read the recommendation of using OData 4.0, which supports external object change data capture. When in case a deed or a deed score changes for a kid, we will be able to capture that information using change data capture, and we will be able to create an SMS outbound WhatsApp SMS record with using digital engagements to solve that requirement. At this point in time, as we move forward, the wishes identified, that the gifts are identified as well. Kids have been performing really well and been really good. We now want to deliver gifts to them. A couple of key considerations that Santa Corp really wants to solve for, and basically
that's time. But
okay.
keep going.
Okay, sorry. So the ability for them to be able to scan the QR code at a point of receipt, as well as scanning a QR code when a drone picks it up. So my recommendation is to use the out-of-the-box capability to generate QR code on the asset, which has the record ID, and a couple of integration points, which is via the mobile app to ESB and Salesforce to update the status on assets. And the same thing goes from drone to ESB to Salesforce to update the asset. In both cases, the update is going to be via remote call into Salesforce using standard REST API, as well as request and response to get the gift delivery location from Salesforce. As we move forward, we have a couple of key considerations that I wanted to go through, was around cases, as well as how we're going to be able to upload proof of delivery. At this point in time, the proof of delivery is also on a drone. The drone has a record ID of the asset. And then once the asset is delivered within the appropriate place, the drone will take the picture and upload that picture against the asset record as a Salesforce file. And then there are also requirements around kids having different levels of support in case of a gift that breaks down, or to reach out to Santa Corp. My recommendation is to use case and entitlements. That's another consideration for using Service Cloud for our internal users. And that concludes my presentation.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Cool. Sounds about 31 minutes 43. So you sort of almost made it. But I think you probably want to speed up a little bit. I think overall you did a fantastic job. So that was a difficult scenario. And I think you did a really, really good job from kind of start to finish. But you need to speed up just a little bit, like not too much, because you are doing a really good job at walking through those requirements, detailing out your solution. And so you don't want to not do that. You just need to get just a little bit quicker. That's all. All right, let's go top down. But yeah, like given the complexity of the scenario and the fact that you only had 30 minutes and kind of everything that came into it, I think you did a fantastic job. All right, so good overview, kind of going forward. Like I kind of note, and I think it's totally fine that you didn't have a slide for it. It was totally fine that you kind of did that just kind of verbally. That was fine. Multi-org, I think is I liked your solution there. I think that was the right way to go. I mean, having 2.2 billion customers on one Salesforce org just wouldn't work. And so I think this is the only reasonable option, because you can't really make like the customer record an external object or host it externally. So this is a really good example of a good use case where you want to go multi-org. Let's see, and I like kind of your use of kind of like having the pilot just work with the single log, but kind of scale out per region after that. Good highlight of multi-language. Yeah, all the assumptions are good. And now when you say the data model is built using principle of least privilege, I guess it's kind of more the security model is built using the principle of least privilege. But I really like the term. I like the term principle of least privilege. It sounds nice. It sounds very architecty. So I think continue to use that term. Yep. All right, risks. Yeah, look, this is very good. Another point you kind of throw in there, just talk about scalability on the customer community, is highlight the use of sharing sets. So the reason why customer community and high volume licenses are more scalable is because of sharing sets. It's under the hood, that's a lot more efficient than kind of using the full sharing model. So just, you already kind of talked like around customer community being more scalable, but just highlight that it's due to the nature of sharing sets. And even if you were to go customer community plus, you could basically say that, look, I'm going to go customer community plus for these reasons, e.g. reporting, but I believe I can meet all of the visibility requirements using sharing sets. And so I'm optimistic that we could exceed the guidelines of 2 million records per per community. So that was good. Yeah, good highlight of scheme tables, custom indexes. Really good kind of highlight of the Neuro API and how it's proprietary. So that was really good. I like that. Let's go to licenses. Yeah, look, agree with everything there. That's good. Let's move role hierarchy. Yep, I think this is fine. Yeah, it's an interesting one whether you should include the customers within it or not. I would, I know that you made it very clear that they're not officially part of the role hierarchy. I would probably just leave them out. So rather than having on your diagram, I would leave it out, but then mention it verbally that customers are not on this role hierarchy because customer community licenses don't have a role associated to them. So I think it's slightly better to leave it out versus leave it in and call out that it's not on there. I think that's less confusing. Okay, system landscape. Okay, so I really like the format. I think the diagram is really clear. So I think the format is really good. And I think it's a kind of actually a very efficient way of drawing it. The whole kind of like on the left-hand side, you've got the kind of like different boxes for the different third-party components. So to keep doing that, that was good. I like how you've highlighted all of the protocols that you're using for each one of those. Now from MuleSoft, does that say OData 4.0 versus OData 2.0 for publish? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, so OData 4.0 supports external object change data capture.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay, cool, nice. Maybe just kind of put that tidbit in when you're talking about that, because that's a really nice, that's an excellent example when you're demonstrating knowledge of the platform. So call it out. If you've got kind of 4.0 versus 2.0, just kind of like just throw in that extra tidbit for why 4.0. That would go down well. Okay, in terms of, so I think your use of a public website is good. The key reason for that, I think, is, we're talking very high volumes here, and so it can be very easy to exceed the Salesforce limit of guest users. So I think public website is the way to go. And plus, just generally speaking, I think public website is the way to go. Good stuff in Salesforce. The changes I'd make here, though, is Heroku Connect sits on Heroku and not Salesforce.
Oh, yeah.
So Salesforce Connect is Salesforce and Heroku Connect is on Heroku. But what you could do, and as part of that, you're also missing the line from Heroku to Salesforce. So Salesforce Connect is directly to Heroku, Heroku Connect directly to Salesforce. So maybe what you could do instead is just have the line two-way communication from Heroku and Salesforce, and on top of the line put Salesforce Connect and bottom of the line put Heroku Connect or something like that. Okay. Composer, good. Okay, so Einstein OCR, I believe, is different from Einstein Discovery, and so I would have them as different boxes. Let's see, drones, I think, would be good to see here as well, because they're like it's kind of like its own external. I think it's worth having a box for them. Let's see. Okay, what else? ETL tool, just mentioned Informatica underneath it. You did mention it verbally, but just have it on there. You mentioned data warehouse, but better to call out, I would say Snowflake. Just put Snowflake, and then I think what you'd also benefit from here is Tableau. Especially when you get to multi-org, you're going to need something that's going to be the reporting layer on top of Snowflake, for example. So I'd also throw in a Tableau. You could potentially also use Tableau. Well, I actually don't know, but I'm assuming you might be able to use Tableau for some of the customer community requirements or even kind of internal requirements as well. So maybe do a bit more learning about Tableau if you haven't already. Digital engagement was a really good call out. I would put a box on here for digital engagement as well. You could have gone down the route of field service lightning for fixing drones, which I didn't see in your solution. So that could have been an option. And if you did, then I'd want to see a field service lightning in here, plus the field service lightning mobile app as well. Okay. You could design around it. You wouldn't have to use it, but it felt like it was a bit of a use case here. Okay. All right, data model. So you've got the core data model, and I agree with everything you've done here, but I think you're missing a few things. How are you modeling drones? Because they wanted to see the association between a drone and the gifts that they're carrying.
Oh, yeah, that is correct. Drones would be assets, and then modeling of drones to gifts would be a self-lookup.
Okay. So I think better to think of as drone as like a service resource. If you're going to go down the field service lightning, then it's a service resource, because it's someone who's actually, it could be a service resource because they're delivering things. In which case, you could just use the standard data model. I think gifts are probably better for assets. I think gifts would be appropriate for assets, but drones would probably be more like a service resource. And if you're going to go down that road, then you can also think of things like service appointments, work orders. So a work order would be for like fixing a drone, I guess.
So you can assign a work order to fix a drone that is a service resource?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because I use FSL, and for me it was assets as well as drones. So you can assign a work order to the asset.
Sorry, that's actually a good call out. That's a good call out. You could do this with you could do it with like an asset hierarchy. Yeah, you're right, because that way that would make more sense then if you're using field service lightning for the people who are fixing drones, but drones themselves are not service resources. It's more like a kind of like a system or something, which you model as asset, but then you want something to model. Actually, you don't want to. No, it's one-to-many. It's one-to-many. So you could use the asset hierarchy to capture the relationship between a drone and the gifts that they're carrying, because it's one-to-many. It's not many-to-many.
I actually use orders, but that was my choice.
I think orders. I saw you highlight that as well. I think you could kind of go either direction with orders. I think it could be in the solution or it could be out. I think both would be fine. Entitlements were missing from here. So and milestones. So they did call out the need for SLAs. And they also called out that that the SLAs would basically be based on like a kid's deed score, which for me is like entitlement. So a kid should get different entitlements based on. Okay, cool. So you highlighted it here, good, but you should put it in your data model.
Yeah, I think it should have been in the data model. That's correct. Yeah.
You talked about knowledge. I guess you could put that in the data model as well.
Yeah.
I think the good thing with all of these things is you've got most of the core data model, and so you could easily do the rest on the fly if they kind of challenge you. Another consideration for data model is web chat and WhatsApp conversations.
Okay.
Because that's going to be an object in Salesforce as well.
Yep.
And you could perceivably, that would be useful, right? To be able to kind of see that history of communication with the with your children as well. Products was a really interesting one. For this, be prepared. It's like, so you're likely going to have a large volume of products, right? Because like, think of like every possible thing that you might want to deliver to a child. I don't really know what's best to do with that. I would probably go with an assumption and have products in Salesforce, but you could just as easily make a call for making like the product master outside of Salesforce, but it just adds more complexity to your solution. So to keep it simpler, I would have gone with products, highlight the volumes and make an assumption. And it should work, you know, like I don't know of any like limitation of products. I think it's more about kind of standard large data volume considerations, right? It's like list views is going to be like a key one, right? Stuff like that. So I think better to do products, but just be aware that you're talking that it's going to be LDV.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I should actually mark it as LDV. And that was the key reason. I was thinking, you know, I'll use wish to gift as, you know, external object. That was the key reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you made the right choice in having those as custom objects, and the data volumes are not so large that they can't be custom objects. So that's better as a custom object.
Sure.
The other thing that's missing is gift options. Although you don't necessarily have to model that as objects. So was your solution to kind of, how are you going to do the gift options?
Actually, that's a good question. I need to actually look at what gift options were.
So gift options was for every wish on the wish list, you need to provide 3 gift options that the child can choose from.
And it was done by.
I think I did. I was hoping that I could reuse the wish to gift, but I don't think it's it should be a different object.
So I thought of 2 solutions for that. You can maybe use next best action.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Which could be a kind of cool way to do it, right? So you could basically be based on their wish list and based on what we know about this child, you could kind of make recommendations. And in that case, you could kind of store it within that data model, and you could expose it to the child through the API. So that could be kind of a neat way of getting next best action in there as well.
Yep. No, I think that is correct. We actually can use next best action for that.
Another call out, it's not a perfect fit though, because like next, look again, like as a recommendations engine, next best action I think is a good shout.
Yep.
Another thing that I kind of noticed is like calculation of deed score. I think you didn't clearly state the assumption, which I think you should have done, which is I think your assumption was that that deed system would calculate the deed score.
Yep.
But it didn't state that in the requirement. So you'd have to state that as an assumption.
Okay.
Another option for deed score could be using Einstein Discovery.
Yep, actually, yeah.
So I think in my solution, I thought of using Einstein Discovery to do that. And my knowledge of Einstein Discovery is fairly light, but I'm pretty sure, actually I'm pretty confident that you can then store that result on a field on the object itself, which would work well. And so that in that case, your deed score, you could store that on the person account record itself.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, we can actually do that.
All right. Okay, cool. And the only kind of final thing is knowledge. I don't think it was an essential piece of your solution, but you didn't mention it. So it could be good to have kind of the nice thing about knowledge is you could just have a floating box. You don't have to even connect it to anything necessarily, right? So you could just throw in a knowledge box there as well. All right, on to the business requirements. So I really liked your format for highlighting your solution, and I really like the information density. So I really like how you kind of just kept it to the essential points. So it's kind of very light, but I really like how you kind of highlighted that in blue. It made it really easy to read. So I thought that was a really good approach. Let's see, good call out of using the Salesforce ID as the unique identifier. Good call out of generating the need to generate the letters in batch. Now, Conga Composer itself doesn't do the batch processing. There's another Conga tool. I think it might be Conga. Oh God, what's it called? Orchestrator, maybe, or something. I can't remember, but I think and it's been years since I looked at this, so maybe it's part of Composer. But when I did mine, it was a separate product suite of Conga that actually did the batch processing. So just have a look at that. Good call out of the print house. I like that, and that's how it would work in real life, right? You'd have to actually send it to a print house to get printed. So that was really cool. You made me laugh when you talked about like Santa calls a MuleSoft endpoint, but I think that's completely the right solution. But you just made me laugh when you said that. But I think that's the right way to go, and I think it's reasonable to assume that, considering we're talking about things like neuro APIs. So I think that's cool. At first I thought that you weren't calling out the integration pattern, but I later recognized that you did. It just wasn't super clear to me. The whole kind of RCI, for example, remote call-in. Maybe if you can just say remote call-in instead of RCI. Hopefully it won't take you too much time, and it should make it more obvious to the judge. Okay, let's see. Now Einstein OCR, I think you talked about making an external call out. So that's kind of more Einstein. This is kind of showing my knowledge of it. So I guess Einstein Vision, I believe, is kind of external call out. I know on the roadmap, OCR is like, that was a highlight of Dreamforce, that OCR is kind of coming into the platform. Maybe just have a little look at that, because I think it's quite common, especially in this day and age, to get like an OCR requirement. So maybe just do a little bit of reading on the current state of OCR with Einstein. Good call out of multi-language. Now, you didn't need to go into too much detail of this because of the pilot. So I think you didn't need to elaborate more on that, but anyways, good call out. Really good call out on the use of external change data capture. So that you, so I guess in my solution, I would have needed this because I assumed that Einstein Discovery was calculating the deed score, but considering your solution of having that as like an external object, no, I think that was wrong in your solution. I think that was missing from the solution. It was like, where did you store the deed score? So I think you stored the deeds as an external object, which I think was the correct way to go, but I think you kind of missed where the fact that the deed score would need to be stored on the person account, in which case it wouldn't be an external object. But I like that you were thinking and acknowledged and knew of the use of external change data capture and how you could use that to then trigger, say, like a WhatsApp flow or something like that. My last point is, you mentioned like out of the box capability to generate a QR code and assets. Is that?
Yeah, I think I misstated that. It's just using a formula field.
Okay. So you threw me off there, because it's so just make sure that when you do that, you talk about the use of like a formula field, for example, to do that. Yeah, look, that's it. I think you did a really fantastic job. Like, it was a challenging scenario. It was complex. There was a huge amount of kind of systems and some really kind of and through the very nature of the scenario, it was easy to be thrown off by it. Like I said, it took me a while to get into the flow of this one, because we're talking about Santa and elves, and it didn't quite click as me as fast as kind of like a more common scenario. So I thought you did really, really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Right. And any other comments or questions from you guys?
No, it was just interesting to see that this is probably one of the first ones that we have very different solutions. As I said, I mentioned I did orders instead of just assets. That was one of me. I think I used a lot more Heroku to do like the deed scoring calculation. I started delegating more to the external processing, and that was just with the intention that, well, if this needs to be scalable, it'd be better to have these kind of systems in place so that you can hook up another org in the future to already calculate these things. That was the thing, and I think it was very heavy on FSL. I think there was a lot of indications about it that you should really use FSL, because like the technicians need to take a photo on their mobile app, on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Need to be able to say something on the map. Yeah.
I agree. I think it was definitely pushing you towards field service lightning.
I think there's quite a few of field service lightning for sure. I think personally, I don't know enough about digital engagement, which is gap in my knowledge. So I use Marketing Cloud instead to solve all of the interactions. But yeah, it's just interesting to see. It was very differently approach we had.
Nice.
Yep. I use Marketing Cloud as well, and Field Service Lightning, modeled assets as drones, and then plug them in as a service resource.
Yep.
One question on your data model, I think, what's in between the wish list and the product?
Yeah, so it's like a probability of what's the probability of this child having this gift to be sent to them.
What's the name of that object? I cannot see very well. Wish
to give.
okay. Because you were mentioning, Chris, the wish options, and that was the object I used. For me, that would be enough with using a custom field as a status. So which ones will actually be?
Well, I think you still need this, because a wish list can have up to 5 gifts, so up to 5 wishes, and each wish. Oh, okay, yeah. So a wish shouldn't be associated to a product. It's your gift options that is then going to be associated between a wish and a product.
Wish options. Yes.
Yeah, because your gift options is what links you to a product. But that works perfectly well with Einstein Next Best Action. That could work.
Yeah, and that would actually not even need then this object, and just say wish based on the recommendations we create. Next best action would just recommend, okay, these are the 3 products.
Yeah. No, I think you'd still
need that.
You'd still want to have the custom object to capture the relationship, like capture that this was the. Oh, it's an interesting one actually. Whether you'd still want a custom object to capture that, but next best action would certainly be a good, or could be a good fit for recommending those options based on those wishes, and then what you select could then be stored as ultimately the gift, right?
Yes, that's something I did very differently. I assumed the recommendations were just like so many recommendations. It's like a database, so I put them in an object, and I assign them to with a junction object to the accounts. That was kind of like a knowledge based kind of thing. That was my way of doing it. But I think, yeah.
Nice. All right, guys, I think we have to wrap up. But yeah, awesome job again, Nadim. That was really good. Oh, also, hang on, I'm just going to pause the recording.